What's going on, my fellow rock and rollers? Don't forget to hit the bell notification icon to be notified every time I put out a new video on my channel. While the demise of Bon Scott may seem like a straightforward death by misadventure story on the surface, there's been many conflicting accounts over what actually happened. In my opinion, Bon Scott's death is one of rock and roll's greatest mysteries, and almost 40 years after his death, new details continue to emerge on what happened on his last night alive. Stay tuned to find out the full story. Few bands have managed to do what acdc has accomplished. The band has managed to stay relevant for over 40 years, and they've survived tragedy after tragedy, with the band members passing away, the media blaming them for both fan deaths and for allegedly inspiring a serial killer. And one of the first tragedies the band dealt with was the death of frontman Bon Scott. The story of what happened to Bon is built from the recollections of several people, one of which was named Alistair Kinnear, Joe Fury, and Silver Smith. These three people all have something in common with the drug heroin, something that Scott was alleged to have used by some, and the rest of the story of what happened to the singer is based off the testimonials of the members of acdc, the band U.F.O, and Bon's Japanese girlfriend named Anna Baba, who briefly dated the singer in the run-up to his death. Although it's important to note that Anna wasn't allegedly with Bon the night he passed away. Born in Scotland in 1946, Scott's family would move to Australia when he was just 5 years old. He learned music at a very young age, first taking up the drums. He dropped out of high school at age 15 to start his first band, the Spectres, who would merge with another local band and become the Valentines. Bon Scott would take a bigger role in singing, becoming the co-vocalist, and the group scored a few hit songs on local and national radio. But by the end of the decade, the band disbanded due to artistic differences. And in 1970, the then drummer and occasional singer moved to Adelaide, where he fronted a progressive rock band known as Fraternity. By 1973, the band changed their name to Fang and would be touring the UK, where they were a supporting act to the band Geordie, whose frontman Brian Johnston would coincidentally enough replace Scott in acdc following his death. And prior to the UK tour, Scott married his first wife, a local named Irene Thornton, whom he met the previous year. In 1974, Bon would suffer a devastating motorcycle injury that left him in a coma and put his career as a drummer in jeopardy. After he would be released from the hospital, he would take up odd jobs, including being a chauffeur for a local band named acdc, who just happened to be on the search for a new singer. He would become the band's frontman in 1974, and the following year the group released their first album with Scott titled High Voltage, and the band made their TV debut with the singer on a local music program called Countdown, where they performed the song Baby Please Don't Go, which featured Scott dressed as a schoolgirl, which complemented guitarist Angus Young's signature schoolboy outfit. The band would release several subsequent albums, but it would be their sixth record, 1979's Highway to Hell, which would first break the US Top 100 charts and make acdc one of the most popular rock acts in the world. The tour to support the record would be the band's final with Scott, who would die just 3 weeks following the group's last show in Southampton in the UK. Scott was in London in February of 1980 working on the group's upcoming Back in Black album, and he was living in a flat with his new Japanese girlfriend Anna Baba, but also in the picture was his former girlfriend, an Australian named Margaret Silver Smith, who was involved in the drug scene, which we'll talk about later in the story. The daytime for Bon was for recording, while the nights were for partying. On February 15, Scott was in the studio and the Young brothers were working on 2 songs named Have a Drink on Me and Let Me Put My Love Into You, with Bon playing on drums instead of singing or writing lyrics. 4 nights later, on February 19th, Scott was with several friends at a local music club, and the events of that night are heavily debated, but the official story goes as follows. Scott invited his ex-girlfriend Margaret Smith, who also went by the name Silver Smith, to see a band at a club named Dingwalls in Camden. Instead, she sent her friend Alistair Kinnear, who was either a fellow musician or rock journalist depending on who you ask, and Kinnear and Scott would end up at a different club that night called the Music Machine, not too far from Dingwalls. Kinnear was allegedly the last person to see Scott alive. The official story goes on to say that after leaving the Music Machine, Kinnear drove Bon back to the singer's flat, but Bon had already passed out, so Kinnear turned the car around and drove back to his house in southeast London. Kinnear parked the car, a French Super Mini Renault 5, outside his flat. Kinnear then called up Silver Smith asking her what to do with Bon, and she suggested to leave him in the car since it wasn't out of the ordinary for the singer to pass out after a heavy night of drinking. Kinnear would claim to the London Standard a few days after Bon's death, I just could not move him, so I covered him with a blanket and left a note on him to tell him how to get up to my flat in case he woke up. Kinnear would also claim that he put Bon on his back to sleep in a more comfortable position. But Bon would never wake up again, dying at the young age of 33 after just 5 years into his stint with acdc. Kinnear alleges he awoke early in the evening of the 20th and checked on Scott and found him unresponsive in the car. He rushed the singer to King's College Hospital, but he was pronounced dead on arrival. The official cause of death from the King's College coroner's office was acute alcohol poisoning. The toxicology report made no mention of drugs. Strangely though, when Kinnear found Bon's body, it was not in the laid-back position he had been left in. According to author Clinton Walker, who wrote the book Highway to Hell, The Life and Death of acdc legend Bon Scott, he described how the body was found, saying, "His body was curled around the gear stick, his neck twisted, his dental plate dislodged, the bile rose up in his throat and blocked his asthmatic windpipe." Now we get to the conflicting statements about his death. 2 days after Bon's death, Kinnear, in the same London Evening Standard article, revealed what happened the night before the singer passed away, saying, "I met up with Bon to go to the music machine, but he was pretty drunk when I picked him up. When we got there, he was drinking 4 whiskeys straight in a glass at a time." Not everybody agrees with Kinnear's recollection of events, because also at the music machine that evening with Bon was original acdc drummer Colin Burgess, who told author Murray Engelhart, who wrote the book acdc Maximum Rock and Roll, "I can definitely say that to this day that when we left, he was definitely not drunk at all. And we went home and the next day he's dead. To me, it's just a really, really strange thing," he'd say. And Scott wasn't the first rock star to die this way. Jimi Hendrix died the same way 10 years prior, and Led Zeppelin's drummer John Bonham died in the same manner a few months later in 1980. Scott's biographer Jesse Fink, who wrote the book Bon, The Last Highway, also disputes the official story, saying he was a prodigious drinker. The idea that 7 double whiskeys would put him in the ground seems like a strange notion. And the confusion around his death gave rise to some to claim that he may have been murdered, with some believing the band wanted to get rid of the singer. Also adding to the mystery was that Kinnear disappeared a few days after Bon died, and strangely, his flat was ransacked. Kinnear would never be heard from again, and some have even cast a doubt over whether Alistair Kinnear was a real name or an alias, or an amalgamation of several people who may have been with Bon Scott the night of his death. Now let's talk about another confusing part of the story, which involved the band U.F.O. Some reports suggest that on the evening that Bon died, he was supposed to meet up with U.F.O. members Phil Mogg and Pete Way. According to classic rock writer Jeff Barton, Peter Mensch, who was at one point acdc's manager, criticized the members of U.F.O. for being a bad influence on Bon. The members of U.F.O. were known to be hard partiers and dabbled in heroin, and claimed that Bon was around them at those times, but couldn't recall whether he was using the drug. Both U.F.O. and acdc had previously toured together, with acdc being the openers. According to U.F.O.'s Pete Way, he claimed he was informed about the death of Bon Scott on Tuesday morning, but Alistair Kinnear claimed he discovered Bon's body on the evening of Tuesday at 7:45. Also adding to the confusion over the death was whether heroin was involved. While the 3 people connected to Scott were involved with the drug, acdc claimed the singer never used. But 2 books have cast a doubt on that. Scott's biographer Jesse Fink interviewed those who knew Bon and claimed he was dabbling in the drug around the time of his death, and pointed to 2 near-death experiences during the mid-70s. Fink would also conclude that the drug basically contributed to the singer's death, saying, "Basically he had a 3rd overdose and this time I got him. That's the conclusion I come to." And Scott wouldn't die a rich man with only $30,000 in his name, and an updated version of Fink's book claimed that Kinnear was not alone at his flat the night Scott died, as there were apparently 2 other people staying at his house, including a rock musician named Peter Parrott and Zena Kakol, his wife. Following Scott's death, the band would soldier on, hiring new singer Brian Johnston, and their follow-up to Highway to Hell, Back in Black, would come out 5 months after Bon's death and serve as a tribute to him. acdc guitarist Angus Young would tell VH1's Behind the Music, "We just wanted a simple black cover. We wouldn't have even done him justice in words. Even the bell in the beginning of Hell's Bells was our little tribute," he'd say. And released in the summer of 1980, Back in Black went on to make acdc international superstars and remains one of the biggest selling rock albums of all time. Some would also claim that Scott had apparently written some of the songs on Back in Black, but was uncredited. Even his ex-girlfriend Silver Smith claims to have seen journals and notebooks from Bon Scott featuring the lyrics to the infamous song on Back in Black, "You Shook Me All Night Long." That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like button and subscribe. And if you guys have suggestions for future topics, let me know in the comment section below. Take care.